Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with author and life coach Jamal Jivanjee. He is a best-selling author, podcaster, and full-time life coach. As an author with over 20 years of experience working with people in various stages of personal struggle and challenges, he's well adept. And after traveling to many cultures around the globe, he is now a full-time coach, and he's passionate about serving individuals, couples, companies, and groups on the path towards enlightenment, wholeness, and liberation. He has discovered the common roots of human suffering and the sustainable solutions required to help people become liberated and empowered. Enjoy this interview.
Thank you for taking a minute out. And what I want to do first and foremost before we get into your life and coaching and what you do, I want to know how you survived this last 2 years of COVID. How did you get through it? And how did that time period subsequently change the way, not only that you live your life, but the way you approach business?
Wow, first of all, what a great question. I love that question.
Thank you.
Yeah, COVID, as far as the event that happened in 2020 and all the subsequent ramifications from that, to me it's been instrumental in my work as a coach, but it's actually been a catalyst for me personally, greater health. It's also been probably the best time for my business in the coaching world. It's been, I can't even imagine what life would be like as a coach without it, because it has really opened up so many doors, if that makes sense.
It 100% does, and that's the thing that's interesting about everyone out there providing levels of mental health and wellness, is that this is a time historically in our lives that's been so monumental. I mean, you know, I look back on my life and all of these episodic events that have happened, but there was nothing like this. This was, you know, it was huge. But let's get to the essence of what you do exactly. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to transport you into the front of a room of third graders at a career day, and one of them looks up at you and says, "What do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
I love that question, and I would say, and I don't mean this in a smart aleck way, but I would say I live for a living. And I actually wrote a book called "Living for a Living" with that title, because typically what's meant by that question when someone says, "What do you do for a living?" I understand the question, but unfortunately, I think a lot of times what's meant by that question is, what do you do for money? What do you do to survive? And I learned from my own experience, just the way I grew up, that what you do to survive is one thing, but it doesn't necessarily equate to living. So I say, if you live well, you will survive. But if you just seek to survive, you may not live. And there's a difference there. So living, in order to truly live, I think you have to get to, I mean, there's a lot of components to that, but what does it really mean to live? Well, it means for you to be exactly who you are, living from a place of non-resistance and actually expressing the life in the way that brings you the most amount of satisfaction and value. That to me is what it means to live. So in a nutshell, I'd say I'm living for a living. Now, I do a lot of different things, but I'm living for a living. And when we live well, life will actually, I've discovered that life will pay you. And what I mean by that is life will pay you, support you to live well. It comes with the living process. But survival is something quite different. You know, if we seek to survive, you may survive, but to what end? What will you do once you survive? And then that becomes, I think that becomes why so many people are unsatisfied with simply surviving, because if we're not actually living, when we're here to live, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. So when you were in the third grade, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, there's actually a couple of things. When I was a child, there was a couple of things I used to daydream about doing. One of the things I would, and this would come out in my play with I have a brother who's a year and a half older, and we would play firemen. So we would act like we're firemen, and we would visualize ourselves being firemen and just, you know, doing what firefighters do and rescue people and that kind of thing. And the other thing that I always daydreamt about was being a truck driver. So when I got a little older, I thought, well, that would be a really cool job. You know, people just drive trucks around the country and they see new places. And I loved, every time I would travel, I would just feel invigorated. And so I daydreamed about being a firefighter and a truck driver, which is, I always say, both of those dynamics is what I do today. I just didn't know it, but the seeds of that were in what I was visualizing as a child.
So let me ask you this. Let's go back to your childhood. Talk to me a little bit about where you were born and raised, and you're obviously a highly motivated person. What kind of seeds were planted in you that made you who you are today?
Yeah, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. I was born and raised. My father, he grew up in East Africa. It's a little island called Zanzibar, which is part of modern-day Tanzania. At the time when my dad grew up there, it was part of the British Empire. It was a British colony. My dad's heritage, his side of the family is from India, actually. So a lot of Indians settled East Africa because it was all the British colonies at that time. And so that's where he grew up, in Zanzibar. He came from a devout Shiite Muslim family. And my mother, she was born and raised in southeastern Ohio, in a very rural part of Ohio, has some ties to West Virginia and that kind of Appalachian culture there. So very different culture. She was kind of a country girl by nature. And they were pen pals. That's how they met. They just wrote letters back and forth for about 6 years. And he proposed in a letter, and they got married. So they brought and it was really out of desperation that my father proposed to my mother, because Zanzibar, the island he grew up on, there was a revolution on that island. They became independent from England, and then they were forcibly annexed to Tanzania. And there was just a lot of tension between the different racial groups on the island. A lot of Indians were being targeted that lived on the Zanzibar island. So my dad's family really needed to escape. They escaped to Kenya. So then he settled in Mombasa, Kenya, and really had no prospects because he wasn't a citizen of Kenya. He had no ability to really work and support his family. And so the only thing he had going was he was writing to this American woman, and he thought, if we get married, maybe that's my ticket out to some better opportunity. And he took a risk and asked her to marry him in a letter, and she said yes, which was just completely blew her, her family's mind, because that was not something she would typically do, nor has anyone done anything like that. They thought she was making a big mistake, but it worked out. Dad came, and they got married, and I'm a product of that. So I grew up in a household where there was a lot of there was obviously two very different cultures. My mom was a very devout Catholic, and my dad was a very devout Muslim, and that's not typically done in their cultures, but they made it work. They agreed to disagree on the matters of faith. But then, of course, when kids came around, and so I was, I'd go to the mosque on the weekends. I went to Catholic schools eventually during the week. So I was always a very curious person. I wanted to know what life was about, why, and I was very observant. So I'd always observe my parents, what was important to them, why did they do what they did, and what I saw a lot of, because my mother and father, even though they came from very different cultures, what they had in common was they were very much dealing with the generational trauma of poverty. And it really affected them. And they really stressed, the survival process and working to make money to pay the bills. And I saw that from afar, and that deeply troubled me. I knew there had to be more to life, even though I was very appreciative, and I still am. I look back and so thankful for, the foundation that my parents provided for me. But I just had a deep longing from the observation of their lives. I had this deep sense of there has to be more to living than simply surviving. And the reason I asked that question is because I saw the trauma that they existed in from that place.
Everyone has people that we look up to, role models, heroes. Who has that been for you?
Wow, I love that question. For me, one person that comes to mind that this began really early in my life and still to this day is a role model is Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers. I love that
nice.
guy. I love the work that he's here to do in the world, because his mission, so to speak, was to help children understand that first of all, that their life has inherent value apart from what they contribute to the world, that their existence has inherent value, but also there was a lot of the message that was communicated either directly or indirectly through Mr. Rogers' work, was that your life is your creation. It literally starts in what you can imagine. And that's what you can, like he talked about, it's like a garden. Your mind is like a garden. What you plant will grow, and that is what you will produce in life. And even at an early age, even though I don't think I could have consciously understood that or articulated that at an early age, there was something extremely hopeful because I grew up in such a background of limitation and poverty that when you really to think about your life as like a garden, like literally you can plant what you want to grow and it will grow. And I love that. And that's why he's to this day a hero of mine.
So if you could meet anybody alive on the planet right now and spend a little time with them, who would it be?
Probably an Indian mystic by the name of Sadhguru.
Every day you wake up, you have a motivation. You have things that you want to do. What is it that motivates you, and how do you quantify a good day at the end of the day when you're done?
Yes. So to me, and I love the question because to me, your whole life is today. And I tell people in my coaching work, people come to me all the time and they say, "Hey, I'd like to change my life." And say, "Hey, that's great, but let's forget about your life for a moment. Let's just think about today. What would it look like to change today? Because your whole life is actually today. Like you have no other life. You will never experience life outside of today. So for me, today is full of opportunity and possibilities, but I will never be able to tap into the possibilities of what today can be unless I'm in a state of non-resistance. So much of my life I spent feeling like life was a problem and I had to solve this problem. I had to figure out the problem and solve it. And that was coming from a lot of what I didn't understand was a lot of, perceptions at the subconscious level of that life is, there was trauma, there was pain, there was an impending doom coming. I had to always prepare for something. But a lot of this was coming just from past constructs. And I was in a very resistive state with life. So I would see life as, well, I hope it's a good day. Today's a good day. Today's a bad day. And I was always evaluating and judging a day. And I always say, life is not good or bad. It just is what it is. And if you can learn to get into a non-resistive state with life, you can actually experience it as it is. And if you get into a non-resistive relationship with life, you will see that there are certain things that are important to you. There are certain values that you have. And if you can treat those values and give intention to those values and give intention and attention to those values, your day will be rich. But that only can happen when you're not in resistance to it. So I say a good day is a day in which I'm in a state of non-resistance that lets me participate with the day as it is. And that's a process that we have to learn, obviously. But that's a good day.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. So, let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into your younger version of yourself in your 20s. And you could give that young version one piece of advice based on the wisdom and the roads that you've been down, things that you've learned in your life. What would you what would you impart to your younger version?
I think I would tell myself, number one, that nothing is personal. That because a lot of the pain that I experienced in my younger years, of the resistance I would experience, is because things felt very personal to me. Somebody's not, I felt abandoned or betrayed in relationships. I felt like life was stacked against me. I felt like, maybe at my job that people were overlooking me. And a lot of that is a perception. And I would say, when there's suffering happening in the present moment, it needs a past reference point. And so I would tell my younger self, hey, what you're experiencing, the suffering experience is not personal to you in that moment. It's just because you have past reference points that need healing, that need attention. So it's not personal. None of it's personal. The way you're perceiving life, don't take it seriously. Hold it lightly, because almost nothing, you will come to understand that almost nothing is personal. Everyone's operating from their own set of, perceptions, and they're operating through their own lens. It's not about you. And just that understanding that it's not personal would allow me to become a little bit less resistive or reactive to life.
What's been the best client response fan letter you've ever received from your services?
Probably this may sound a little bit strange to some people, but the best thing I've heard from a client was basically the gist of it was I said, what's been your experience with a lot of this inner work that we've done through the coaching process, and they said, I can just sit and I can be with people. I can sit and enjoy my meal. I can sit and be with my loved ones. And that may sound very anticlimactic, but I get it. Because what's robbing us of our life is our inability to be right here, right now, in this moment, as if it's the most important moment we've ever experienced. That's what robs us of life, the resistance. Because we're trying to get ahead. We're trying to get somewhere. We're struggling with the moment because we think there's a better moment in the future, and we need to improve upon something. So we need to get somewhere to become better. And when people come to the end of their life, or even unfortunately, a lot of people will get diagnosed with something terminal, and usually it's almost unanimous when people get that understanding that their life is coming to an end. They always say, "I wish I would have cherished the little things, like the cup of coffee or the meal or the conversations with people." And to me, that's really where life is lived out in the mundane, moment by moment existence. That's what our life really is. And most people just spend the bulk of their life trying to get ahead, that they miss it, and then they regret that they missed it later. And so when this client said to me, I can sit and be with life, and it's not painful, and there's no suffering, I'm actually at peace with life. To me, now they have everything they're going to do in the future. They have it at their fingertips. They have access to create their life now because they're not in resistance to it. Because what you resist persists. But when you're in non-resistive state with life, you can create it on your terms. And I knew at that moment when they told me I'm okay with life the way it is, I knew the future is their creation. And that was the best thing. I think I can't top that.
So everyone out there has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your clients, but ultimately you live your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Yeah, that's a profound question. I would say that I'm learning to understand that I am, that my life is just simply, it doesn't mean anything, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but I just am. I exist. I am. Because anything I can add to that would be a limiting definition. Because everything I would add to that is also temporary. I could say I'm a coach, but I haven't always been a coach, and there'll be a day I'm not a coach in that sense, in that capacity. Even I could say I'm a human. I'm a male. I'm a human being. I'm a husband. But there will be a day where that will come to an end as well. Also, with at some level when my body expires. So at the end of the day, what I'm learning to perceive about myself is that I'm life. I am just pure life, and I play certain roles in life, but that's the roles I play is not me. I just am, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. So Jamal, if anybody out there wants to learn more about you and your services, anything related to your world, where should they go?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I like to direct people, probably the easiest, I am active on social media, but probably the easiest place to get in touch with me is through my website, which is JamalJivanjee.com, first and last name.com. And I have a podcast, coaching work, all of that. I have a book, as I mentioned, Living for a Living. All of the links and access to those components of my work are available on the website.
Man, this has been great. Hey, thank you, Jamal, for taking some time out today to talk about your life. I really appreciate it. Have a great holiday and a great 2023.
Oh, you as well. I really appreciate being on your show. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and so much more from around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube, also on Spotify. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.